Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I have a special guest with me today. Her name is McOmber. She is a classmate of my husband's, and she just made her very first quilt. So I wanted to talk to her and let's welcome her to the show. Welcome, Molly.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing. I know it's probably confusing to be like, I just only made one quilt. Like,
Oh, no, I'm not gonna lie. I've totally been like telling my friends, I'm like, guess what? I'm gonna be on a quilting podcast. So
I love that. Yeah, I was really excited. Well, one, when he came home, he's like, guess what? I asked this new person I just met today if she wants to be on your podcast. I was like, what?
yeah.
But
I was like a little taken aback. I was like,
uh,
okay. Yeah, it's not usually typically something I would do. I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want to put myself out there, but I was like, but this sounds fun.
yeah. Well, hopefully it is fun for you because it's always a good time for me. So
Yeah.
well, that's awesome. So I understand that you did just make your very first quilt like over the summer.
Yeah, so it's actually not quite done. I have to finish like binding the edges
Okay.
and that's it. And then it's done.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it was I ended up having like a pretty relaxed summer with a lot of free time.
Mm.
And I had been getting into sewing a lot and I had just gotten my first sewing machine. Before that, I had been using like my grandma's 40-year-old sewing machine that was slowly falling apart.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I always thought that being able to make quilts was super cool. Actually, my math teacher in high school, I don't like math, but I loved her. And I ended up taking calculus because I loved her. And I went to a charter school and every senior that was in one of her math classes, she would make a quilt for.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah. So it was like my graduating class was like 30,
Oh,
but that's still a ton of quilts to
that
make
is
in
a
the school
lot.
year. Yeah. So I just thought so I basically took calculus for the quilt and I always thought that that was so cool that she would just use like old clothes that her family would give her and like whatever kind of recycled materials that she found. And
Mm.
she would make just like these beautiful quilts that were super cool. And we all loved them. We all were like, oh, these are going to be heirlooms.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of something that I was like, oh, I really respect that. Um, and I had like seen a pattern for like, a puff quilt
Mm.
when I was
Yeah.
just, scrolling one day and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like maybe someday in the future I can make that.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, I want you to make me one of those. And I was like, yeah, that's never gonna happen, probably.
You're like, I don't know.
Yeah. Um, but because I ended up having so much free time, I was like, hey, like, what if I made you this quilt?
Mhm.
Um, and like, what if that's my summer project? Because I have like a more relaxed summer. And she was like, yes. But I made a mistake because it was like it's for my parents' bed, so it's like a king size.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like, I tend to be overly optimistic.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a very big undertaking that I did regret at some points, but I am glad that I did it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I like for my first quilt, I picked a twin size,
Yeah.
which I think even that is too big for your first adventure into quilting. And although the pattern I picked wasn't that complicated, it was enough complicated that I was just like in tears by the end of it. But but I also tried to make the quilt top in one day. So I don't know.
Oh
You
yeah.
give yourself the summer, that feels
Yes.
like a more approachable situation.
Yes, I tried to. I did have to like keep encouraging myself to do it though, because there would be
Yeah,
points where I had like cut out so many squares, and I was like, I can't do it anymore.
right. You're like, I'm sick of cutting fabric.
Yeah.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. That's so funny. So you made the quilt for your parents. You said, oh my gosh, there's a fly in here. I'm so sorry. Um, it just like hit my face. Um,
Oh,
yeah. Okay, so you made the quilt for your parents.
yeah. So it's late, but she told me it was okay if it was late. It's for their anniversary, like their 25th. maybe
Oh, okay.
the 25th anniversary. And my dad loves like handmade blankets. So I did like the finger knitting, and I made him one of those for Christmas. And then I just like made a really, really simple blanket for one of his like birthdays or something. And then for the anniversary, she was like, well, I know he would love this. And then I can make it whatever colors I want. And he can't complain because he loves, handmade blankets. So it'll be a
Yeah,
win-win. So
exactly.
yeah.
That's so cool. Well,
Yeah.
lucky them that you're willing to like adventure into that for them.
Well, they do have to wait for it. I'm hoping to get it done this weekend.
Yeah.
Like officially done. I keep saying I can't even tell you how long I've been being like, okay, well, it should be done by like this week, and then it's not.
You're like, I'm just kidding. One more week.
Yeah, pretty
Oh,
much.
man. Are you hand binding it?
No.
Okay.
When I read the pattern through the first time, I was like, I'm definitely gonna hand bind it. And then by now I'm not gonna do that.
No.
Just gonna get it.
I don't like hand binding.
You
And some people
don't?
are like, oh, I love it. It's so therapeutic. And I'm like, I'd rather not. I machine bind all my own quilts.
Okay.
I
That's
have
good.
done I have done hand binding, and I'll do it for this fly. Um, I'll do it for clients, but I for myself, I I don't know. I've just decided I'm good with like bright and colorful thread, and if I'm gonna stitch my binding on, I want it to be part of the, you know, part of what makes it look good. And so I will do contrasting thread with the binding and just make it all kind of fun, and like plus it's faster. You can get your quilt done so much faster.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And some people don't like that you can see the stitching, on the back, but I really don't care. Like it doesn't bother me in the least because it's right along the edge. So even if you do see it, it's not like it's down the middle of the quilt.
Right. Yeah.
So, and like I said, for clients or for other people, like I'll hand bind it if that's what they want. But some people want it machine stitch for the durability. They're like, no, this is gonna be on my bed. I'm gonna wash it or whatever. Like I want to be able to wash it and dry it without worrying about the binding popping off. So
Oh yeah, that's good to know, because I was kind of like, when I, because the pattern I like followed was by someone who has their own quilt like shop and everything, and I was like, oh, that's what real quilters do, is they hand bind it, and that's what I'm gonna do. But
yeah.
no, I'm not gonna do that. So it's good to know that not everybody has to do that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's like, I think that's part of like my mission of this podcast is like really just spreading the word and the knowledge that like there's so many different ways to approach quilting, and you don't have to do what certain people say, or even what seems traditional. Like you can machine sew your binding on, you can, it's like you don't have to do things a very specific way. There's so many different options for how to approach things, and every option is fine unless it's like breaking stuff.
Yeah.
Like do what works for you and do what makes you like happy, and what allows you to keep your joy for the craft. Like it does not bring me joy to sit and hand bind a quilt, so I'm not going to do that if I don't have to, because I want to enjoy the process. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool that you kind of encourage that, because I think especially as I was like really deep into the process and like kind of rethinking what I had agreed to, I was like, I am not cut out for this.
Yeah, I've thought that several times for myself, so you're not alone. Especially my first time quilting, I was like, this isn't my thing, it's not going to be a thing, and it is a thing. So you you just kind of have to roll with the punches and take the hard stuff with the good stuff, and if the good stuff continues to outweigh the hard stuff, then that's how it's probably a good hobby for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
So,
there is like the gratification, of course, because
mhm.
even though it's not done, I'm like, I did that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's like It's so nice. I like got so excited when Abe was like, we should have a display, like we should display quilts in our house, like because we redid the whole downstairs of our house last summer so that we could start an Airbnb in our house. And so we themed it with quilts, of course, and we made a display wall in the living room. So there's like one wall, it's the same green that's behind me. And there's like a curtain rod on it, and we just interchange quilts. And I just love being able to hang up the quilts I've made, because
Yeah.
when they're like, you know, folded up or on the couch or something, you don't always get to look at it. But like, I love being able to like, walk in the house and see my quilt. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I made that.
Yeah, it's like a piece of art. It deserves to
Mhm.
be on display. That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's fun. But anyway, yeah. So what, like, in with the process that you've done so far, what was the most satisfying part for you?
I think the most satisfying part was when I was like stuffing, because I was doing a puff quilt, like stuffing the quilt top and like putting the rows together.
Mhm.
Then it was like finally coming together, like into a blanket quilt shape.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, I felt like I was never gonna get to this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of for me like the part where I felt like it was like finally coming together, and that
Mhm.
was really cool.
That's fun. I've never made a puff quilt, so that's interesting that that's like your first project, because just like from what I've seen, it uses such different techniques than just like traditional piecing.
Yeah, I don't know that much about like traditional quilting.
Mhm.
And most of the like crafts, I like crochet, and I like to
I do
sew
too.
garments and stuff. Oh, okay. You like to crochet too?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's so fun.
yeah.
But all of it I like learned by myself. So I learned
Okay.
online, and I just kind of, so I don't really have any kind of grasp of what's traditional, because I'm just like, oh, this looks fun, and then I do that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but from what I can understand, like this like pattern is very simple.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I figured it would be a good place to start. But yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I've like looked at patterns just because I've been interested in seeing like what the process is like. So I'm like, how do you even do that? And I'm like, oh, I see. You kind of end up like quote unquote quilting as you go, because you're like
Yeah.
sewing the individual squares and then sewing those together, right? Or
Yeah.
okay. And then
Yes. So you like
down.
sew through the you sew the little, it's like you make little pockets. So you sew
Uh-huh.
the three sides. And then you sew them into rows with all of the openings on the same side. And then you
Okay.
stuff them, and then you sew it to the next row, and then you sew.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like quilting.
Sure.
All
I
you
mean,
like you typically would think of it.
sure. But I think, you know, I mean, it is. I think the idea came from somewhere. They didn't just like,
Yeah.
it's probably a way that quilting happened before, and they're like, I know, we can just add more stuffing. I don't know like where it
Yeah.
came from, but I just think like stuff like that usually tends to like come from some traditional thing that occurred in history. It was like a way that they used to make super warm quilts or something to stay warm in the winter, and then now we're like, we're gonna make it cute.
Yeah.
This is the 21st century, it's gonna be cute.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no,
that's
it's
fun.
it's pretty cool to think about how people like would hand do everything.
Hmm.
Um like I can't even imagine. I cannot. I was like, I don't know how anyone did anything.
I know. And even especially quilts, like,
Yeah.
occasionally we'll see a quilt that somebody's like, oh, this was my great grandma's or whatever, and it's all hand pieced and like it's huge. And I'm like, I could not imagine just sitting there and like hand stitching everything together.
No, me
But
neither.
it's how if you didn't have a sewing machine because they weren't
Yeah.
super available, like that's how you had to do it. And I guess too, if you're not in a society like we have now, where there's so much to do and so much to go see, and it's transportation is so easy, and like that was what you did. You didn't
Yeah, that's
watch
true.
movies or TV or just go out all the time. Like you sat at home and you sewed, especially
Yeah.
women. Like, but man, that's crazy. So do you back those quilts separately, or is it all kind of just one? Like,
Yeah, so I like did the quilt top, so I had all of my little stuffed squares sewn
mhm,
together, and then I did the batting and backing all at
okay.
once, and then I did the little ties.
Oh, you tied it. Okay.
Hmm.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Okay. I wasn't sure how that worked. I'm like, wait, would you put a backing on that? But I guess you would. And then that
yes,
adds extra warmth.
yeah, I'm like, it's very heavy. It's very heavy.
Yeah. It's hard to avoid with king size quilts though. I mean, even if it's just like simple with just like cotton, they still get so heavy.
Yeah, there's just so
A
much
lot.
material. Yeah.
So much fabric.
Yeah.
Yeah. What what would you say was the hardest part of the process so far?
Um, I think there was two things.
Mm,
So the first thing was the repetitiveness of it, because it was too big. I should have started with something smaller. I think it was like when I was sewing the squares individually, and I
mm,
had like 800 and something of them.
yeah.
I was like, this sucks
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
And I would feel like I would like spend the whole day at my sewing machine and I would like not get anywhere. So that part was really, really hard.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and then the second part was because I am not good at like perfectionism. I'm not good with measurements, and I know this about myself. And so when I was cutting the squares, I was like, okay, I can't just like let loosey goosey
Yeah. Right.
everything. I have to be precise because I know it'll like affect me later. So then when it got to like sewing the rows together, like there was a few times where like things were not lining up, the squares, and I was really frustrated. I was like,
Yeah.
what did I do? Like I tried, I feel like I did my best and it's not working and I'm not cut out for this.
Oh my gosh. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that happens even when you think you're being as accurate as possible. And even when you've made like over 100 quilts,
Oh
like
my gosh.
it's still tricky because it's like if the slightest little thing is off and you do that over a whole quilt or like a whole row of, quilt squares or blocks, like then everything's off. It's like it might be off by a 16th of an inch at the beginning, but then by the end it's off by like a whole inch and you're like, what is happening?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it snowballs. And so there are ways around that. So it's kind of like just learning those little tips and tricks of how to like work out the kinks of things not lining up perfectly. But yeah, I feel yeah.
That's good to know because I was like in my own little apartment, like, what? This is impossible. How do people do this? Like they must be like wizards.
Yeah. Feels like that sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, even this, Abe's quilt, even though it's crazy and it's all plaids and flannels, you can't really tell, but there's so many bad seams and nothing lines up because I was just like, I don't care. And I used to not pay attention to seam allowance as much because I just was like I didn't want to not see the whole piece of fabric. And so I thought seam allowances were for crybabies, but also I'm the crybaby now because so many of my early quilts, the seams are popping because they were too close. And so I'm like having to hand sew parts down because I I was like sewing right along the edge instead of giving myself that space. But
Oh, that's such a bummer.
it is. But it's, I'm like, whatever, I did it to myself because I
Yeah.
was just thinking I knew everything and could skirt the rules of quilting, but you can't.
You must obey them.
Yeah. There's certain ones like that, making sure you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance,
Yeah.
or you're gonna suffer the consequences. And I am suffering those consequences. So there's, I mean, yeah, probably 4 or 5 quilts that I'm like, I should probably sew the binding down on that now because it's going to completely come off the quilt, or
Oh,
just like finding little spots where I'm like, oh, that corner is completely unsewn. I should probably sew that down. And you know,
oh no. I remember I was talking to my mom about some issue that I was having early on. And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm just like, I'm worried about this, and that sucks because that means I have to redo all of this." And she was like, "Well, why? Just don't do it." And I'm like, "No, because then later it's gonna come undone."
right?
It's like, I don't see why you agreed to this.
You're like, this is for you, mom. I would hope that you would want me to do it right.
This is for you. She's just like the opposite. She like is not like the opposite of a perfectionist.
Mm,
I don't want to do that. So
yeah. No, I'm a super perfectionist. So I think that's why quilting can work, because I definitely do pay attention to details, and I want to get it right. So there are things that I'm like, oh, that's fine. I'm just gonna fudge that and leave it. But then it's like in the moment, I just like try to let it go. But then the end product, that's like all I can see is that like glaring
yeah.
error. No, nobody else sees it, but I do, because
Yeah.
I know it's there, and I'm like, but
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you gotta let go somewhere, and I think lean into the perfectionism when you're cutting your pieces and when you're sewing your seam allowances, but and lining up seams, but everywhere else it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah. That part's you can have a pass on.
yeah. Well, do you think you'll quilt anymore, or like learn different
Um,
quilting?
yeah, that's a great question. I think if you would have asked me like when I had finished tying everything, because the ties took forever. I had like calluses on my fingers.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and I was like, I probably would have said no, I'm never doing this again. This is worse. But I think maybe after a good break, which I won't have any time because of school, but
Right.
maybe I think it would be interesting to like learn maybe more traditional methods and start with
Mhm.
something smaller and more manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and then I went to my aunt's house and she is an amazing quilter. And we went there for family reunion and there was just quilts everywhere. And like the quilt that they had on our bed was like this beautiful pattern. I can't even, anyway, she just like throws them together in a day. She was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I just needed a project and then here's a quilt." Oh
Yeah,
my
of course.
So yeah, I think that kind of like re-sparked. It was like, oh yeah, there was a reason why I wanted to do this in the first place because this is so cool.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe somewhere down the line.
Hmm. You can make
Yeah,
yourself like a quilt when you graduate from your master's.
yeah. Celebratory quilt. Maybe
Yeah.
one for my dog's here. She wants her squeaky toy. That is
Oh,
what's happening. If you're curious. She loves like the whole process because she's like, oh great, there's like more, there was a big blanket for me to lay on.
hmm.
So
Yeah.
she can have a quilt.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like when I sew with my friends, we're all in different, stages of the process, and we'll be laying out our quilt tops or laying out the blocks to figure out how we're going to sew them together. And um their dogs, or like my other friend has a cat, and like they're just like all over our quilts, and we're just like, "Ugh, whatever." They're testing them out for
Right.
us to make sure they're comfy.
Yeah, exactly. At some point, there's like nothing you can do about it. You just have
Yeah.
to let them enjoy it.
Mhm. We're like, oh, they're just being our comfy testers. So
Yeah.
like, we approve. This is great.
Yeah, it means you've got a good one.
Yeah. Like, well, as long as they're laying on it, that means it's good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't sew at home anymore as much, just because of the Airbnb, um but yeah, our cat used to lay all over my stuff too. So
Yeah.
sorry if there's cat hair in people's quilts, but I would try to keep her off of it, mostly just because, cat hair is annoying, but
Oh
uh,
yeah.
but yeah, it was inevitable. I would like leave the room for 2 seconds and she's laying in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh, and she'd see me come in and she would scurry or, scatter the quilt blocks if they were laying on the ground. I'm like, "Oh
Yeah. I know when I was like laying them all out, the pet for like, because I was doing like I was trying to do like an ombre between, it was like a black and a mint kind of
oh,
intermixing between like whites and grays and whatever. Anyways, I had to like rearrange my whole living room and like push everything into the kitchen because I have kind of like a small apartment. And
yeah.
so like I was laying all the squares out and I was like, Luna, which is my dog, do not touch them, please. I beg of you.
She's like, I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much.
She's like, they're kind of cool though. So I think I'm going to touch them.
Kind of fun.
They do love scattering them.
Yeah.
And these,
Very helpful.
the dogs I have experience with, they just love to walk in across them. And they could go around. There's like plenty of room to go around, but they're like, I'm going to go through the middle of this situation. You're like, wow, thank you.
Thank you so much. You're so helpful.
Like, wow, I really needed to redo that today.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So was like, what did you, or is there anything that you learned about yourself through the process of making a quilt that you maybe didn't know before that was kind of like a new realization for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my first reaction to that question is like how impatient I am. 'Cause I really expected like I like knew it was going to be a challenge, especially because it was so big. I was like, oh, I know it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a rough to like, do the same step over and over again, but like I think I can do it. And then like there would be parts where I'm like, I like cannot do this. This is impossible. So yeah, I quickly learned that I'm quite impatient.
Mm.
But then I also am pretty proud of myself because like I think having it be for someone else like was an important pusher for me because I tend to be more of a procrastinator.
Yeah,
And it was a
too.
pretty big project. So I think that kind of helped me. But I'm pretty proud of myself that I like did it.
Yeah.
Like, because it was like obviously a lot of time and
Mhm.
and hard work, but I was like, I can do those things. I can do that kind of yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if because even when I had like agreed to it and I was like putting it all together and kind of like planning everything out, I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna be able to do this.
You're like, wait, I think I
Yeah.
need to take back what I said.
Yeah, I think I know you bought all the fabric, but we're not doing it anymore.
Oops.
Yeah, so yeah, just that I can do it. I can do that. And I think it was really encouraging for me to hear you say that like your first quilt was really rough.
It was.
I'm like, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not built for this. That's a bummer. But
Yeah.
now kind of like hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can. Maybe I
Yeah.
can do this.
Well, and I think even for me, the worst part too is that I had such a hard time and I had help. Like I had my friend sitting right there with me the whole time, like showing me exactly how to cut the fabric and like what it meant to square things up and how to use a sewing machine and like how to sew everything together. And like she was literally by my side the entire time. And I still ended up in a hot mess of tears. And it was
Oh,
like a 12-hour day plus 12-hour plus day of just start to finish, like because I've been around sewing and crafting and stuff because my mom's been sewing since she was a little kid. And so,
okay.
she was always doing something when I was growing up. And she never quilted though until like maybe a year or two before I started. And but even still, like I had to kind of learn how to relearn how to use a sewing machine because she had shown me when I was younger, but I was like I had too much anxiety to even think about using her sewing machine. So I was like, what if I break it? Then she's gonna hate my guts. And it was just the whole thing in my head. But
Yeah.
so it was just kind of like I was relearning the whole like sewing thing in one day, as well as learning how to cut fabric, as well as learning how to, you know, read a quilt pattern. And even
Yeah.
with help, it was hard. So by yourself, I can imagine is even harder. So
Yeah, there's definitely some downsides. The first time I ever like was making a dress,
mm,
I had like a friend who's gonna help me, and she was like, "Oh, here, like just make a mock-up of the bodice." And I was like, "Yes, I
yeah,
got it." And it was so hard, and I finally got it done, and it was like garbage. Like it was barely even a piece of clothing at
yeah.
all. And she was like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "I don't know." And then once she was like there to be like, "Okay, this is how you do this." And so there's like definitely advantages to having people who
Mhm,
actually know what they're doing. And I feel like it saves you a lot of time and
mhm.
tears.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like when I quilt, mostly I'm with my mom or my friends. And so even if I feel pretty confident, it's just still nice to have somebody there to be like, hey, is this how I would do this? Or, you know,
Yeah.
is there a better way to do this thing that I'm doing? And usually, you know, if it's me and my mom, like we can kind of brainstorm through it. And same thing with my friends, like, oh, I actually do it this way. And it's like way much, it's way better. And it's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks.
Oh yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, like having that process. And I don't make garments, but my mom has made tons. And the way she can just like whip them out so fast, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. I still ask her to make me stuff. I'm like, do you want to make this for me? She's like, I guess. Just kidding.
But that's awesome. You have that resource.
I know it's so nice, but I'm like, I should probably learn, but I don't really want to sew clothes. So I don't know. It's another one of those things where I'm like, I'm scared to start because if it's as addicting as quilting, then I'm screwed.
Yeah, I know now that like I'm not, I'm very beginner at all of it. But now
Mm,
that I have a vague idea of how to make garments, I'm like, why would I ever buy clothes again when I
right?
can just make it my own? I don't have any time now, but
Right.
I still think like that.
Yeah. I know. I'm like, I should just make clothes because yeah, I'm feeling very like, what's the word? I don't know. Like I want to be a more of a minimalist than I am. Maybe
Yeah.
not full on minimalist, but I definitely want to look to material things less for
Yeah.
comfort than I have in my past. And so um I just chatted with a zero waste quilter and that really inspired me. And I think it inspired my mom too, because then I was like using a bunch of scraps, and by a bunch, I mean 12 different scraps that I happen to have large pieces of, and
Okay.
then cut very small pieces out of to make a clock face
Oh, wow.
out of another quilter's pattern that I have chatted with on here. It's the quilt clock pattern by Holly Clark.
Okay.
And it was really fun. And it was the first time I've done any paper piecing. So was it yesterday? No, the day before. Wednesday was the very first time I paper pieced anything, and it was that clock. And so I was like, oh, I'm busting my stash, but it was like because you end up with these like tiny wedges.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, that didn't use as much as I thought it was going to. But then my mom was like, I know we can just do all these scraps. And like she pulled these scraps out from other quilts we've made and just like whipped up together two baby quilts. I was like,
Wow.
see, we can do this. We can bust our stash. We can like go minimal. We can like, quit buying so much fabric, which I mean, I don't know.
It's a good goal for the distant future.
Yeah. But yeah. So I don't know. So you made a dress. Have you made anything else like clothing wise?
I've made, what was the first thing? Oh, the first thing I made is a skirt, kind of like a semicircle skirt with the buttons down the front and little pockets. And that's still probably my favorite thing that I've made. There's definitely like mistakes, but I'll wear it often.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. I made like a button down shirt out of some like weird fabric that was on. I used to work at Hobby Lobby.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so I think that inspired me too, because I was like, I got to work in the fabric section with all the ladies who were like experts in my opinion.
Yeah.
So anyways, like I would find like weird fabric that was super cheap. And so I made a button down out of that. I'm currently working on another dress, but it's in a box somewhere. All of that project is. I made a pair of shorts that they're gone now because I looked at them. Well, I couldn't figure out for the longest time when I first made them what was wrong with them. And I looked at them the other day and I had like cut on different, like I had cut some of them on the bias and then some of them other ways, and it was a stretchy
Oh,
fabric. And I was like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? So yeah, I'm still a very beginner, but at least I know not to do that anymore.
yeah. Lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
You have to make those mistakes sometimes to be able to figure out how to do it right. Because, like, I mean, you can read directions and you can think you're doing it the right way, and then still find out you did it the wrong way, and you're like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I thought I could read, but apparently I can't.
Right. Yeah. There is several times where my friend who like would come over when I was working on like a sewing project and I would be like reading the pattern and I'm like, don't understand what it's saying. Do you understand what it's saying? And she's like, no. It's like a riddle sometimes.
I know. I'm like, okay, let me read this out loud. And I like say it out loud. And I'm like, it still doesn't make sense.
Yep.
I'm like, Mom, read this. I don't know what it's saying. She's like, I don't know either. I'm like, what? If you
Yeah.
can't read it, then I definitely have no hope. And it's hard.
Who wrote this?
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of a soapbox of mine. Like, you're gonna produce a pattern and put it out there for other people to use. Like, please make sure that it makes sense. Please make sure that you're not like forcing the people using your pattern into these like ridiculous situations where when you could have simplified it if you had just taken like the 10 minutes to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think I probably have talked about it on an episode, but I made a quilt for a client and it ended up so cute, and it's such a cute quilt. And I actually had someone else ask me to make the same quilt, like not even knowing that I had made the same quilt for someone else. They were just like, I keep seeing this all over the place and I really want one. And I'm like, okay. But it's fine because now that like I went through the pattern and I went through the process of simplifying it because of how it was written was atrocious, and it was so hard to follow, and it made so many steps that were unnecessary that could be simplified and like save you time. I don't know, it was crazy. So I like went through, like made all these notes so where I could cut down on some of the steps and get this stuff done faster. And so I'm not as hesitant to make it, but man, that first one I was like, I am never making this quilt again. And then
that sucks.
Like ready to make it again. So it's small, it's like just a throw size, it's not that difficult. And really the concept of the blocks of the quilt are simple. It was just how it was written that made it really hard, because it was just like not very organized.
Yeah, that sucks. That definitely seems like something you should consider of like how other people are going to look at it.
Yeah.
And interpret it. Yeah.
I think, yeah. Well, and it's easy to just put a pattern out there, right? Like in this digital age, it's like really easy. It's just like with anything else on the internet, you just have to be willing to understand that like not everything that anybody puts out there is going to be great. And
yeah,
you have to be kind of willing to grapple with that too. But in the end, I think if you run across something like that, you end up learning more than you would have if you had just followed like a super easy pattern, because you have to learn more, you have to be willing to work with it more and understand it more. And I don't know, there's some merit to it, I guess, but also like just write better patterns.
Yeah,
that easy.
Just do better next time, thanks.
Yeah, well, and sometimes too there's like you can like post a question into like a quilting group on Facebook or whatever, and be like, oh, I'm working on this pattern and I'm really like I'm really struggling with this part. And usually people will like, oh, I made that too, and here's what I did to fix that, and da da da. Like a lot of times there's people who know exactly what you're talking about and they can help you through it if you don't have like an easy resource near you or that you could call really quickly, you know? So that's kind of nice too.
Yeah, that is nice.
The more experiences you get too, sometimes with those harder things, like the better quilter you become as well, because
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
you just tough it out and learn more. So
Yeah. Like I don't have an option. I started this. Gonna
mhm.
figure it out.
Yeah, well, and especially if it's for someone else, like,
Yeah.
okay, this person's paying me to know how to make this, and so I better figure it out because I can't like tell them all of a sudden, like, I actually can't make this thing that I just
Yeah.
said I could. That's never happened, but I don't want it to, so
Yes, no, definitely not. That would not be fun.
no, it wouldn't be fun. But oh man. Well, I think it sounds like you're off to a pretty good start. You took on a huge endeavor, making a king size quilt for your very first one, and a puff quilt no less. So I have nothing but respect for you.
Oh, thank you. I
Wait.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and like what a cool thing to be able to give your parents too. I mean, I think that kind of makes it more fun to me, I think, is like not just making it for yourself, but like you get to be like, oh, I made this really tricky thing for these people that I care a lot about. And hopefully they can see that and
Yeah. I
know
told
that.
I told them they have to treasure it forever. It's a family heirloom now. Like
Yeah.
it's has to stay forever.
Yeah. Are you gonna put a label on it?
No,
No.
I don't
Oh.
think so. I don't have one.
Well, you can like hand stitch one. You can hand
Yeah,
embroider
that's
one.
true.
Or um there's like fabric markers, like permanent ones you can like write on the label and like hand stitch it to the backing. That's the way you
Okay,
can do it.
cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to do that just so they have a little reminder of me.
Yeah. I was gonna say like we've made labels for people too, but like because we also have embroidery machines, like
Yeah.
simple ones, not crazy, um but it's just nice. Like my parents made me a quilt for my master's graduation.
Oh,
Um yeah, like well, my mom made the quilt and my dad embroidered the label for me, but they put a label
wow.
on it and it was just like it's the coolest thing. So now like I always whoever ends up with it when I'm dead, like
Yeah, they'll know.
they'll know exactly where it came from and why. And I'm kind of like retroactively being like, I should probably label my quilts like at least made by me and when. And
Yeah,
I
that's a
have,
really good point.
yeah, I have photographic record because, you know, I posted everything to Instagram so I can go back and see when I posted it. And be like, okay, I made it this day, like, or, you know, at least this time of year during this
Yeah.
year. And I don't know, talking to people that have all these vintage quilts in my family and sometimes who made it and for what and why can kind of get lost in the generations. And it's sad because it's like somebody put so much time and effort into that for it to just be like, I don't know, like I don't know where this came from or who made it or why. And it's just
Hmm.
part of the family. I don't know. It's like ugh, feels sad almost like
Yeah.
you don't want to be forgotten.
Yeah, I think about that a lot when I like go to the thrift stores because oftentimes I'll be like looking for fabric at thrift stores or just to see if I can find anything.
Yeah.
And I'll see like often quilts and I'm like, and if I can tell that they're handmade, I'm like, why is this here?
Yeah.
It deserves to be someplace better.
Right. It's what's going to end up. Where's it going to end up? And
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just sad to me to think that like people just see it and go, we don't want this. It's like, well, why? Like,
Yeah.
and, you know, it could just be some extenuating circumstance of like maybe somebody did pass away and they didn't have any family left to go through their things. And so
Yeah.
their stuff just got donated or whatever. But it's like, oh man,
Yeah.
that would be so cool to have been able to pick that up and go, oh, look, there's a label on it and it says it was made by so-and-so for this person and
Yeah, that's so
you
true.
know 1930 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just food for thought, but also I need to have that food for thought for myself too, because I never think to label my own quilts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something I had thought about, but that's a really good point.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's like I've seen some really cute, like easy, I don't know about easy, I shouldn't say that because I've never tried it, but like good tutorials on how to like hand embroider your label if you want to, and like,
Mm.
picking a font and kind of just tracing it out on your fabric, after printing it on paper or whatever, and then stitching it that way. That way it's not just like your janky like little kid handwriting. I don't know. I tried to
Yeah.
like hand stitch some words once and I was like, never again, guys. This is never happening again. It looked so bad.
I think I did a pillow cover for my mom. I didn't make the pillow cover, but I embroidered it.
Mm,
Um, and that one came out pretty good, I do have to say.
good.
But yeah, I think if you go smaller, because those are like pretty like good size letters, so it was pretty simple. But I feel like the smaller you get, the harder it is to make it look neat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. But I think too, if you have the right tools and you're prepared, I think I was just trying to make it happen
Yeah.
in like too short of amount of time, and I didn't really plan as well. I was like, oh, I'll just wing it, and that was a terrible idea, but it turned out fine. It was just, again, that perfectionism kicked in and I was like, I could have done better, it should look better, and beating myself up about it, and it didn't really matter in the end because the person loved it, so it didn't matter. But
Oh, yeah.
it's fine. And I just mostly, if I want to write on a quilt, I will write in it with the long arm machine. So it's like in the quilting.
Yeah.
So, you find ways to work around those things, right? But ultimately the idea is to label your quilts. So back to that.
Yeah. I when I was like putting all my pieces together, or
Mhm.
like my rows, it got super heavy.
Mm,
I was like, I could see why it would be beneficial to not do this kind of quilt.
yeah.
Because it got to the point where I like had because it was just like adding on the rows, one after another. So I had like 30 something. And they were so heavy, it was like affecting. I'm like, can I hold like this quilt up while I'm like sewing so I can be in a
Yeah.
straight line? So yeah, I think I definitely learned some lessons there about
Yeah.
like, yep, different kinds of quilting and why that one might have been a little bit more challenging in just that area.
Yeah.
Need to learn a little bit more.
Hmm. Yeah. They can really get like so heavy and hard to deal with. But one way I combat that is like I'll do I'll sew half the rows together and then the other half separately, and then I'll join them in the middle,
Mm,
or like close, if there's an odd amount, or even if there's an even amount, I'll just do there's 5 rows, I'll do 3 together and then 5 together, and then I'll sew them together. So then it's still kind of heavy, but then at least you're just like you've got it more balanced as far as like
yeah.
how much weight there is and where you're sewing, and that tends to work. But I don't know if that would even work for a puff quilt.
It probably would. I think I thought about it at one point, but I was too nervous because I had
Mm,
like all of my little piles in this order, and I could have, ideally you just go backwards, right? But I think at that
mhm.
point I had made too many mistakes.
Oh, you were like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I was like, I can't risk it. I made a lot of, because we adjusted the size a little bit from the pattern to make it like a little bit bigger than a king, so it could like fit their bed more specifically. And I did the math wrong a lot of times, so there was a lot of like, oh wait, I actually don't have enough squares.
Oh no.
Yeah, and So yeah, I really thought I would be better at math by
Quilt
this
math
point,
is
but
no, quilt math is different. It
okay, thank you for the validation.
and we call it quilt math specifically because it takes a different brain, like because you have to take into consideration the seam allowances, and you have to take into consideration like, okay, if I have this situation, okay, that's going to eat up some of the length of my quilt, and like you just have to like think about it so differently. And so like unless you're doing it all the time, it's like not quick. It's not a quick thought. It's like, okay, I have to really think about this.
Yes, thank you for that, because I don't even know how many times I like messed up some kind of math in the process of this. Come on, man.
I'm like, it's just arithmetic.
Yeah, right. My poor
Yeah.
math teacher, my quilting math teacher would be so disappointed in me.
Like, I swear I'm trying. Yeah, it just is hard. It's hard until it's not. And even then it's still hard. So, for as many quilts as I've made or helped people with, or, it's like, how much of this do you think I should buy? I'm like, I don't know. Hold on. I like pull out my calculator.
Yeah.
Let me just look into that really fast. And then there's days where I don't even need to get a calculator out. And I'm like, I'm gonna need this much of this and this much of that. And then it's like spot on. And I have, the perfect amount of fabric, and it works out. And I'm like, wow, I'm a genius.
You are a genius.
And then other days I'm like, I cut that an inch too short. And now I have to redo all of it and go buy all of the fabric over.
Oh, no.
That's not fun. But sometimes you can just sew that inch back on and it's fine. This depends.
It's like it never happened.
Yeah. You'll never see that extra seam. It's fine. Yeah. I think it's one of those things too. It's kind of like you can get really good at it, but you're not gonna not make mistakes. So
yeah,
I think you just get more comfortable with the mistakes you do make, and you get quicker at understanding how to fix them. So then it's like not that big of a deal. You might be like swearing a lot, which I do when I quilt, because
it
just happens. It flies out of my mouth. But it's just a learning experience, right? So
yeah, that seems fine.
Yeah, like
I think for me, I kind of have to equate it to like crochet projects, because those are so much smaller. And there's been so many times where I remember I was sitting with my roommates would make fun of me because I would just like sit there and crochet when we did our activities. And I remember there was like one time where I was trying to make this hat, and I just like started it and took it out probably like 10 times or more. And they're like, why are you doing that to yourself? And I'm like, because once I figure it out, it's going to be really great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think that's having that experience is kind of helps with the sewing stuff too, because it's like, all right, I've had to pull out, 3/4. I was like 3/4 of the way through a project and had to pull the whole thing out because I realized I'd been counting the rows wrong. And I was like, wow, cool. And so having been through that so much, like sewing is similar. I mean, kind of like, oh, I mean, I wouldn't throw a crochet project away just because I messed up. Like, I'm not going to dump this quilt in the trash just because, I made one little error or whatever. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of trial and error, which I think is kind of a hard lesson. Like, I think it's an important lesson that honestly, like crocheting and sewing has taught me, like that kind of perseverance, which is like, might sound silly, but I feel like it is like something that you kind of have to like coach yourself through almost, because it can be so infuriating. I'm just like tears in my eyes redoing something. But it's like, I feel like it's such an important life skill.
It really is. And too, though, even though the crochet stuff, like experience helped with quilting, I feel like you're not cutting the yarn, right? So if you undo it, you still have your whole skein of yarn. Whereas if you mess up the cutting of fabric, you don't have, you can't just like you don't have the whole piece anymore. You know, it's not like, oh, it's back to being a 1 yard. It's like,
Yep.
no, it's now into a bunch of tiny pieces that, it's like at some point you do have to get more. And so I think, there is maybe some more high stakes mistakes to make.
That's true. I agree. Yeah.
And so it is a little scarier, I think, but ultimately, I agree with you that, having those skills is important, and it is important life skills, because you have to be able to go, well, okay, I messed that up, but here's what I can do better next time, and then move on, because that's human, right? That's human life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, but also fortunately, because I think if you're open to it, you get to learn a lot about yourself and
Yeah, that's
and
true.
other people, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah. Yes. It's just like not super fun in the moment.
yeah, for sure, it's swear word inducing, and
Yes.
I mean, but that's therapeutic in and of itself too, right?
Yep. That's true. There's good parts in all of this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being willing to chat with me about your experience. And, hopefully if you want to quilt again, like I could be a resource for you if you want. And I'd be happy to help you through another quilting adventure. And
Yeah, I probably will take you up on that if I end up doing another project. Thank you for having me, even though I'm just like a first time quilter.
no, I love that. And I love that you're so young and you're willing to like venture into this thing. And I think it's important for the craft that young people get involved and, turn this granny craft into something that's meaningful and can be carried into the future. So not that it's not meaningful, but
But just like having, you know, everyone recognize as we pass through generations that it is something that is meaningful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, well, thank you again. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon about your next quilting adventure and we can get it made and you're gonna love it.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will talk to you hopefully sometime soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.